the introduction and the preface no one's familiar with. So yeah, I thought I'd read from it and comment. And if there's time, we'll take questions. So I guess I'll proceed. Let me see if I can bring it up. I'll be looking at it on my screen rather than at all of you. So you'll have to forgive me for the extent to which that causes me to lose some eye contact with all of you. I should say also recently I've got so many nice messages from all the devotees around the Sangha. Affectionate messages. I don't have time to reply to everybody, but I do appreciate that. And all's well here at Audoria. So with that, the book, we'll talk a little bit about the book, I'd say, and I'll read from the preface and comment if whatever comes to mind as I read through. This book is it's a contemporary book in a very limited sense, I would say, in that the English is contemporary and many of the Sanskrit verses and sections and Sanskrit commentaries and so forth have been rendered by me with their implications within them, rather than being literal and so forth. And that is a feature of the book, to the purpose of which is to make it that much more accessible to the English-speaking public. And forgive me for those who are Polish-speaking and Spanish-speaking, etc. I wish I could have done it in all of those languages as well. I'll challenge some of you out there to translate it, and it will be a challenge, I would imagine, as it is for, maybe this morning for those Shamsundar and Guruvaki who are translating in Spanish and Polish respectively. But that's one feature of the book that I would say makes it contemporary. And another feature along those lines is some contemporary references that I may draw upon that people of today's world may be familiar with, other philosophers or poets or songwriters or whatever who have said things that by citing them can help to bring home some of the points. But otherwise, aside from that, it could very well have been, if you could find the right person, translated into Bengali, and I could just put Vaishnav Das on it, and it would look like it was coming from, centuries past. I haven't tried, that is to say, in this book, to speak to anyone but really initiated devotees. So I haven't tried to make it accessible at the same time to people in the world who are part of contemporary spirituality, for example. So that said, excuse me, a preface. I think I've written a preface appropriately so for all of my books. Wrote a book about a preface. The last book I wrote, The Sacred Preface, as I entitled it, was a further explanation of the Mangalacharan, which arguably is the Sanskrit term for a preface, the Mangalacharan of Krishna's Kaviraj Chaitanya Charitamrita. But here, I'll read the preface, and as you'll see in the beginning, I've included some basic ingredients or elements of a Mangalacharan as it has been explained by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, drawing upon the greater tradition and so forth. In a modified way, he included essential or important elements of a Mangalacharan, and those that he has underscored and included in his Mangalacharna Chaitanya Charitamrita. I've included here. So we'll see that here at the onset. Let me begin. A sacred preface should include a prayer, namaskar, in praise of the deity that presides over the pages of a Smriti text. In this text, the deity is a duad, the Yugal, Krishna Balaram, and this is its namaskar verse. I serve the shelter-giving, youthful Sri Sri Ram Krishna, of white and black complexion, both beautiful and benevolent. They are constituted of condensed prema rasa. Masters of great masters, these two brothers live in cow pastures. They are the very life therein of both the cowherds and the cows, and as such, they are absorbed in astounding leelas with their gopas, whose entire person is composed of pranay. So the namaskar verse is a offering of respect to the deities that preside, the deity or deities that preside over the text. Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's Gaura-Nityananda, Vande Gurun, Vande Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sahodito, and so forth. So here the presiding deities are Ram and Krishna, of course, are none different than Gaura and Nityananda Prabhu. And this is my own verse in English, but a Shastravani wrote a nice verse along these lines in Sanskrit, and I drew a little bit from it, but have added some things of my own, just to give the whole history of that namaskar verse. So, obeisance to Ram and Krishna. And the sacred preface continues. What then is does the essence of the text concern? This too is revealed in the text's onset in a Vastu Nirdesh verse. So the Vastu Nirdesh verse is the verse that, in a condensed way, tells us essentially what the book is constituted of, what it's about. So that verse is as follows. What can be said about the gift of Gaur, Sham's Brajalila, about which the Upanishads are stunned into near silence and left to mumble barely coherent phrases such as Shamat Chavalam Prapadye, Shavalat Chamam Prapadye. What then to speak of the giver of this gift, or himself, his Nam, Rupa, Guna, Parshads, and Leela, and of the Avadut Nitai, who gave us Gaur, his gift, and more. Nityananda Ram personifies the Sambandhanuga, explained in depth by Sri Rupa, and his pupils shared it near and far, serving Krishna, Balaram. Surely that is what friends are for, but more, that friend is best who, with sympathy, reminds Sham of the girl that he adores. Jai Radhe, Jai Sham, Garo Pakari, Pratidas Mriyanam, Priyanam, Garo Pakari, Smitida Priyanam. So this verse, the Bhakti Nidesh verse, Sloka, tells us essentially what the book's about. It's about Sakyarasa. And also in particular, it's about a particular form of Sakyarasa that we call Prinarma Sakyabhava, a form of Sakyabhav that is an active participant in Krishna's romantic life. But here I have referred to an Upanishadic verse, what can be said about the gift of Gaur. It's Sham's Brajalila, about which the Upanishads are stunned into near silence. Shutibir Brimrigyan, these are the words of Uddhava, who, as we know, was the scriptural advisor of Krishna in Mathura and Dwarka. I hope to lecture on Uddhava when I go to Madhavan this year in December at length. And there's quite a bit to be said about him. I mean, there's the whole Uddhava Gita that Krishna spoke to him. That is a huge treatise in itself, but an important person. He is a servant of Krishna whose servitude is mixed together, bundled together with friendship, and that friendly aspect of his bhava was given full expression in Braj when he was sent there, and he delivered a message to the inhabitants and to the gopis in particular. And after having done so, he wandered around for a couple of months in Braj, singing poetry, just in glorification of the devotees there, the gopis' love in particular. And he said, it's off the scriptural map what's going on here. It's beyond the Shruti. As is Krishna Nam itself, Rupa Goswami said, the jewels of the Upanishadic aphorisms that are light-giving as to the meaning and purpose of life are all casting their effulgence, their light on one word, one name of two syllables, Krishna, that their reach is subordinate to, Jiva Goswami said it another way, Shrotam api Upanishadam Dure Harikatamrita. The sounds of the Upanishads, as light-filled and enlightening as they are, reside in a realm that is Dure Harikatamrita, very far from where you can arrive at through Harikata, this land, he goes on to say, where all the movements are the voluntary and involuntary transformations of ecstasy, anubhavs, sattvika bhavs, and so on and so forth. So that idea has been touched on here in this Vastunadesh sloka, when I say that what can be said about the gift of Gaur, Sham's Brajalila, about which the Upanishads are stunned in near silence. They don't say a lot about the Brajalila, to be sure. And as I've said here, they're left to mumble barely coherent phrases about it, such as Shamat Chavalam Prapadye, Shabat Chamalam Prapadye. So this is a statement from Chandogya 8:13:1. It goes something like this in English. By help of the black, we shall be introduced to the service of the white. By the help of the white, we shall be introduced to the service of the black. I mean, even that is a little bit of an extended explanation of what's said there. Literally, it's as I say here, somewhat like the Upanishads, stunned to near silence at the very thought, the idea of the Braj Leela, and left to mumble some barely incoherent phrases. Of course, the Gaudiyas, we draw on such mumbling, if you will, and make something out of it, and much more than those who are limited to a literal explanation and are bereft of any feeling for the Braj Leela itself. So Shamach, so from Krishna, from the black, one gets from the dark Krishna, one gets the light Radha. From the light Radha, one can get the dark one, Krishna, something like that. So we look at that, and appropriately so, as an Upanishadic verse, referencing in an abstract way, mumbling about that which itself, the Upanishads, are as bright as they are in this dark world, far from nonetheless. Then, so what could be said about the gift of Gaur, about which the Upanishads can hardly speak? What then to speak about the giver of this gift, Gaur himself, his Nam, his Rupa, his Guna, Parshads, and Leela, and of the Abhadut, Nitai, who gave us Gaur, his gift, and more. Nityananda Ram, I say here, personifies the Sambandha Rupa, explained in depth by Sri Rupa. Sambandha Rupa refers to the forms of love, expressions of love in Braj, that are based on, this is my explanation, I believe it's unique, but based on relationships, sambandha, that are acceptable within the culture and the community. So, for example, a viable, acceptable relationship is parental love, fraternal love, servile love, the love of the servant for the teacher or the guru. These are all acceptable. By contrast, we refer to Sri Rupa has referred to the gopis' love for Krishna and Krishna's love for the gopis as kamanuga. Now, kama itself is a problem. It's the whole problem of material existence, desire. And the most prominent desire is the amorous, or let's say the sexual desire, the erotic desire. So their love has been called kamanuga, and it's a relationship that's not allowed. It's not a viable. It's parakiya, so it's not a viable in the culture. It's not acceptable. So it's been differentiated in that way. And of course, we emphasize when we refer to ourselves in our sampradaya as Rupanugas, the followers of Rupa Goswami. Rupa Goswami's Bhava is the Parakiya Bhava. He's a Kamanuga devotee, or he let's say he lives in Kamanuga. Kamanuga is the approach. Kamarupa would be the ideal itself. Sambandha Rupa, the form of the other types of love themselves. But of them, as I mentioned, Sakyaras is one. And within Sambandha Rupa, or Sambandha Rupa is the ideal, Sambandha Nuga is the way to follow it. Within Sambandha Rupa, the Sakyaras has been underscored as the most excellent, even by Rupa Goswami, in the midst of his, in some respects, placing Vatsalya above Sakya in terms of the intimacy it affords. And he does that at the end of the section long section that he writes about Sakiras, where he says that the devotees of Sakiras themselves, they feel that this is the best rasa, because in this rasa, is how Krishna feels about the friend and the friend feels about Krishna, they're equal, and each feels the same. How the child feels towards the parent is different than how the parent feels towards the child. How the teacher or guru feels towards the student is different how the student feels towards the teacher. So this is the way in which those in Sakyabhav support their sense that their feeling for Krishna is the best. And Rupa doesn't disagree with that there. And of course, in Priti Sandarbha, Jiva Goswami overtly places Sakirasa after, or above, I should say, Vatsalya Ras in terms of excellence and the intimacy it affords, which is something I brought up throughout my book, the feelings for Sakirasa that Vilas Manjari or Jiva Goswami has, how amongst the founding acharyas has expressed some feeling for that, more so than anyone else, as we know from Bhakti Ratnakar. Of course, he worshipped Krishna Balaram deities in his childhood. And so impressions from childhood, they tend to be enduring. So anyway, the point here is that I've said in glorifying Nityananda Prabhu, Nityananda Prabhu personifies the Sambandha Rupa or Sambandha Nuga, the ideal and the means to attain it, explained in depth by Sri Rupa. And the point here is, of course, that there are a couple of ways in which we can look at the term Rupanuga, which is often a term we use to describe ourselves as followers of Rupa Goswami. The term originally comes in Raghunath Das Goswami's Manashiksha. At the end there, he refers to himself as a Rupanuga. And he's really referring to following the bhav of Rupa Goswami. But there's also the sense of following the teaching of Rupa Goswami, which is broader in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, broad enough to include the different rasas of Braj. Whereas in Ujjval Nilamani, he is exclusively speaking about Madhurya Rasa and Sakya Rasa to the extent that it is part or it participates in Madhurya Rasa. So what I've said here is that, interestingly, of course, Prabhupada would never use the term Rupanuga. He never used it to refer to the bhava of Rupa Goswami, but only to the broader teachings and tattva of Rupa Goswami. But here, the point I'm making, I believe, is that Nityananda Ram personifies the Sambandhuga, explained in depth by Sri Rupa. So you won't find anywhere a more in-depth explanation of Sakya Rasa. I've been unable to find, I don't think it exists, than what's been given by Rupa Goswami. And that may be true for all of the rasas of Braj and Sham and Shanta Rasa as well. In his book, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, there's nothing that compares to this book in this regard. So as far as Sakya Rasa goes, he's a very lengthy chapter. He goes into great detail, bringing out different types of Sakya Rasa. You won't find this anywhere. We bow our heads to him. By his grace, we have access to the theoretical explanation, theology underlying this form of fraternal love. I go into that later in my book, his contribution in this regard, but just a mention of it here. So Nityananda Ram, who has given us the gift of Gaur, who himself is the giver of the gift of Braj Prem that the Upanishads are stunned in near silence about, that Nityananda Ram, giver of Gaur, personifies the Sambandhanuga explained in depth by Sri Rupa and his pupils, that means Nityananda's pupils, shared it near and far, serving Krishna and Balaram. So Nityananda Ram personifies the Sambandhanuga, explained in depth by Sri Rupa, and his pupils shared it near and far, serving Krishna, Balaram. That is, of course, I would say the principal characteristic of Nityananda Prabhu that causes us at times to say he's the best amongst all of the associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We can make claims about Advaita, we can make similar claims about Radhar, Srivas Thakur, if we look very closely at their contributions. But this is the contribution. They're all the best, but this is the contribution of Nityananda Prabhu. Near and far, wide circulation, dissemination of the gift of Gaura. He and his immediate pupils, students, servants, his eternal associates, as they were in many cases. Surely, I go on to say that, okay, so let me read it again. Nityananda Ram personifies the Sambandhanuga, explained in depth by Sri Rupa, and his pupils shared it near and far, serving Krishna, Balaram. Surely that is what friends are for, but more, that friend is best who with sympathy reminds Shyam of the girl that he adores. Jai Radhe Jai Shyam, Gadopakari, Smritida Priyanam. So this is again the Boston Desh Shloka, so it's what the book is about. So we can see it's very clearly about the Sakyarasa, but also, here in the last sentence, we see in particular also it is showcasing the Priyanarmasaka Bhav, or those friends who are best in that they express sympathy for Shyam and his love life and assist him in that. This is called Anumodana Bhav, Tad Anumodana. In one Bhav, this case Sakya Bhav, sympathy for the Bhav of Krishna as it's experienced by Krishna, the love of Radha and the gopis as it's experienced by Krishna, what it does for him, these friends are attracted to that, and having sympathy for that, they assist him in that and empathize with his the plight of his romantic life, which is moving up and down. She loves me not, and so forth. Now this, it's interesting to note, because I referred to Sri Rupa here earlier in his contribution with regard to really revealing so many deep and profound insights about the nature of fraternal love in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. This is one of the features of his contribution that is unique, because we know that Rupa Goswami draws upon a considerable body of Indian aesthetics that came before him, and he uses that literature and those insights to describe the terminology there, aesthetic terminology, to describe the love of Braj. So if we look, for example, at Sahitya Darpana, which he drew from extensively, with regard to Sakyarasa, there is mention of the different participants in amongst Krishna's friends, with the participants in his Madhurya Rasa. It's not limited only to the Priyanarmasakas. There are some other aspects of Sakyarasa that afford some sakas some limited participation. But the author, Vishwanath, not Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, but a different author named Vishwanath of Sahitya Darpana, he doesn't have a clue about the Priyanarmasakas. This is totally a contribution of Rupa Goswami. as to what goes on in terms of friendship, um, in terms of its participation in the romantic life of Krishna. And this is a huge feature. I mean, it's just not brought out anywhere. And so again, we defer to him. And I've concluded this Vastandesh Shloka with a phrase from the Brihad Bhagavatamrita. By now, many of you may be familiar with it. It's a signature in my email, Garopakari Smritida Priyanam. This I consider the Mahavakya, the main sound of the first canto of the Brihad Bhagavatamrita. Brihad Bhagavatamrita begins with a search for the highest love. The second canto is a search for is there a place that corresponds with it? So that we could go there? That's the Goloka Mahatmya, the second part. But Nard in the first part is going from one devotee to the next, as you know, praising them. You're the best servant. And each one is saying, no, I'm not. This one is the best. This one is the best. Finally, he ends up in Dwaraka there. And in the context of pursuing the answer to his question, Krishna ends up going into a trance, remembering the Braj Leela, and it causes what ostensibly or what externally appears to be a great disturbance. And Narad feels, oh, he's really made a mistake here. He's come to Dwarka, he's disturbed Krishna. But Krishna, seeing his condition after he comes back to Dwarka consciousness, if you will, he tells him, no, you don't think like that. Garopakari Smritida Priyanam. The Garopakari, the best helper, the best friend, Smritida Priyanam, is the one who reminds one of his dearmost. So you've reminded me of the gopis. It may look like it was very disconcerting, caused a big disturbance in Dwarka, but this is what is most dear to my heart. So you are my dearmost friend. He's saying to Nard, who is Nard? That is the expansion, if you will, from the Braj Leela of Madhu Mangal, a Priyanarma, Saka. So this is a special feature of the book. I've given an explanation of Sakyaras following Rupa Goswami in an entire chapter and highlighting the different types of Sakya Bhav, but for the Priyanarma Saka, I've given an entire separate chapter on. And the last part of the book, aside from the appendices, is a telling of the Aprakat Leela from the vantage point of the Priyanarma Saka. So it is a prominent feature of the book. And to continue then, at last, I should say, but far from least, such a bold undertaking as this book should offer a blessing to its sympathetic reader, its adhikaran, in an Ashirvad verse. So this is the third feature or element of a Mangalacharan, a sacred preface that should be in place. A Namaskar verse, offering respect to the deities, a Vastudesh verse, explaining the essence of the book in a condensed form, and an Ashirvad shloka, which gives a blessing to the readers or those who are eligible for reading. And that verse goes as such. By the grace of Nitai, may the ardent readers of this book attain the prem they idealize, be it Sakya or Madhurya, for Henu Nitai, Vinay Bhai, Radha Krishna, Paite Nai. This is from, of course, Narottam Thakur. He says, there's no rasa without Nityananda Prabhu. It doesn't matter what rasa you want in Braj. You'll not get there without going through Nityananda Prabhu. Henunita Binavai, Radha Krishna, Paitenai, Narottam Thakur. But to those disposed towards Sakyarasa, as a result of sadhu sangha having received such impressions, as did Brahma of yore and more, the mercantile community of Bengal and beyond, may this book serve to assist them in their journey of sadhana to their Sakyarasa sadhya. So it's clear, I think, the verse, but Brahma received those kind of impressions from Krishna. They resonated with him because of his inner reality. And sometimes people say foolishly, where is there any Sakyarasa in Gaudiya Sampradaya? All the acharyas are in Madhurya Rasa. Of course, that's not true in a narrow sense of the acharyas coming from Madhavendra Puri, or in the broader sense, which I'm referring to here, the idea being we are also the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. So there's a wealth of evidence or ways, scriptural reasoning and references to support the idea that Brahma resonated with and attained Sakyarasa. And it comes out in the book. Of course, in a more limited, narrow scope, as I say, coming from Madhavendra Puri, well, we have a prominent person there, Lakshmipati Tirtha's disciple, who was Lakshmipati Tirtha, would have been a contemporary of Madhavendra Puri, that being Nityananda Prabhu himself. So there seems to be a place for Sakyarasa in the Gaudiya Sampradaya. And to continue along those lines, where this Ashirvad blessing verse to the readers, where it leaves off, I continue now here in the preface. The parallels between the seva of my Guru Dev in the 20th century and the divine campaign of Sri Nityananda Ram during the budding stages of the Chaitanya Sampradaya are many and striking. So my Siksha Guru, Pujapad Bhakti Rakshitadev Goswami Maharaj brought this out so beautifully to us on his veranda in a number of sessions. The parallels between the Nityananda Prabhu's campaign and Prabhupada's campaign centuries later, broad in scale, to the downtrodden, as I referred in the Ashirvad Sloka, to the mercantile community of Bengal, which had been disenfranchised socially and religiously. We're in a difficult situation in that regard, and who were Vaishnavas in a nominal sense. Nityananda Prabhu came to them, gave them a new social status that transcended their previous social status, and turned their nominal Vaishnavism into real living Vaishnavism. And he, as I've often said, and I've explained at length in my book, began the whole Sampradaya in a formal sense. His Dwadasa Gopals were the first to begin initiating, aside from his own initiation. Of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was from Ishvar Puri, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu commissioned him to widely circulate as he did. So there are parallels, considerable parallels, between the service of Prabhupada in the 20th century and that of Nityananda Prabhu during the budding stages of the Chaitanya Sampradaya. The parallels are many and striking, and as do many other Vaishnavas, I continue. I see the broad outreach of Bhai Gurudev to be seva that was particularly empowered by Nitai. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada appeared in the world in the extended Saptagram community, that's the mercantile community of Bengal, that was personally blessed by Nitai. And in his adulthood, he petitioned Krishna for a blessing of Shakti, the likes of which we see in Nitai. Of course, I'm referring to his famous prayer on the Jaladuta. In his heartfelt petition and poetry and prayer, he artfully secured in no uncertain terms Krishna's blessing to do the bidding of his guru. Speaking to Krishna as he did with regard to his friend's dependence upon Radha, and reminding him of such, he placed before his comrade a request for the Shakti to deliver Gauravani to the west in the service of his guru, a member of the group of Radha's Sakhis. How could his good friend refuse a request to please a maidservant of his dear most? Thus Krishna Chandra sent the Shakti of Nitai to my Gurudev, and in doing so, inadvertently also released a tidal wave of Sakyarati in our times, the likes of which Nitai himself released in the course of directing all eyes to Gaur Chandra and Gaur's quest for Radhadasyam that made his highest ideal of prema accessible to everyone. Nitai gave Gaur to the world, but in doing so, he effortlessly attracted a following of his own. As such, Sakyarasa plays a supportive role in the Chaitanya Sampradaya, even as this aesthetic rapture of fraternal love is itself contagious. From time to time, it will surface and remind us of itself, and also of its camaraderie with Madhurya Rasa, and in its highest reach of its capacity to mix with the drop of Madhurya's sweetness. Again, a reference to the Narmasakas, whose Sakyarasa is like yogurt with a drop of Madhurya's honey, making that yogurt that much sweeter. Here, to continue, I write in the service of my Gurudev about such inexhaustible topics, of which by his grace I never tire. Should others find this interesting, in me they have a friend. However, not everyone will see, as I do herein, despite the rigorous effort I have undertaken to support the thrust of this book with Shastra Yukti, no harm. There is more than one way to gaze at the sapphire-like gem of Shyam Sundar and his associates. If other opinions are equally well supported, tatastu, so be it. I welcome them. Best not to have enemies, if not, only friends. And to the friends now that repeatedly urged me to write this book, I bow. There were a number of you, and all of your encouragement in this regard and is appreciated. But there is one of you who pushed me over the top, worth mentioning. I was walking back and escorted by Gaur Sundar from the temple in Madhavan to my cottage. We were talking about this, and I expressed some hesitation, and he encouraged me in a way that just really resonated with me. And I committed at that point, walking from the temple to my cottage, just past the cowshed, to going forward with this book. So to him and others, a number of you who urged me to repeatedly, I bow. I was at first shy, as I continue here, to embrace their encouragement, but having proceeded to publish, I have found that expressing myself has humbled me and also served to nurture my faith and conviction. From spiritual conviction comes taste, and then attachment to the object of one's love, which in turn grows into longing to attain that love. Then, in pursuit of fraternal love of God, its primary characteristic, vishramba, of confidence and also intimacy and friendship, pranay, with Gopal Krishna, free from hesitation, is born. So to put it another way, ultimately, this is not something to be shy about. So Sakyarasa is not, is full of confidence and sense of equality with Krishna and so on and so forth. So, of course, to continue, Bhav is like a candle in one's heart that one must protect, lest the wind of drawing attention, undue attention to oneself, blows it out. But in order that this candle may be lit to begin with, the candle itself must be in place. To love Krishna with Vishramba and Sakya Pranay, one will be well served by first understanding the theology and philosophy that underlies this love. And to this acquaintance add to this, the acquaintance with the playful leelas of Bhagavan, both prakat and aprakat, in which this love is showcased, and one has at least put the candle in place. May this book serve that purpose, and may that candle be lit through a concerted effort to acquire grace, and may its flame be protected with humility and the spiritual confidence that is the polar opposite of pratishta. That concludes the sacred, the preface to Sacred as It Is, in my mind, and coming from my heart, for my forthcoming book, Circle of Friends. This last paragraph holds a lot. It's important. Let me say a few words about it. Bhava is like a candle, so candles can be blown out in the wind. It's possible, Rupa Goswami has taught, even in Bhava Bhakti, to make a defense and have the candle of one's Bhava go out. And what we were cautioned about most in that regard is this very lingering but insidious anartha of pratishta. It's insidious and lingering in the sense that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has described it as an anartha that will arise in the context of watering the creeper, the vine, the plant of bhakti. Just as when we water a plant, weeds may also come. The weeds may wrap around the creeper that we're watering. The weed. Sometimes you can look, you can't tell which is the weed, which is the plant, and but the weeds need to be pulled up. We need to be vigilant about this, and this particular. So these weeds are insidious. It's easy to mistake the weed for the creeper and start riding the waves of pratishta. I remember when Balabhatirtha Maharaj came to the United States for the first time. Right here, I sat him down right in my room, made a bed for him in my room where I'm sitting now, which is above the deck. We were holding a program. We had about 100 devotees here, cooking in the kitchen. For any of you who've been here, that's in my house, which is like a very tiny little kitchen compared to the large kitchen in the temple now. And so after his talk, I had him come upstairs and take rest here. And one of his associates was here assisting, also a householder. And he said to me, I did not bring any sannyasis with me on this tour for fear that they would be fall prey to pratishta, that they have gone to the West, like other sannyasis in the mission, and come back, and they're world preachers and so forth. So he indicated, and of course I'm well aware of this, that especially in a position where honor is given, which it's easy, it's hard to digest. It's difficult to digest that. I personally have never had an issue with that my whole life. I just find it to be detestable. The idea, the value of praise. It's nice to be praised, I suppose, but to mistake it for anything more than what it is a great error. So this is the wind, if you will, that can blow out that candle. So of course, Bob's like a candle in one's heart. It must be protected. But with regard to the book and what's been written here, at least, in order that the candle may be lit, to begin with, it has to be put in place. So the teaching has to be there, that the candle and the inspiration, that the candle will show up, and then of course we have to light it with our spiritual practice. So we'll be well served by the theology, the philosophy, the Siddhanta, the Tattva that underlies fraternal love. I mean, Rupa Goswami's written a whole, chapter about it, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Sakya Rasa, and the whole book is about Bhakti Rasa, in a broader sense. So obviously such books are important, and the Leela Granthas, the Bhagavatam, and the extended Leela narratives of the Goswamis about the Prakat Leela, their commentaries, the Aprakat Leela, and so forth. These things together, put together, this, if properly understood, will constitute the candle that we can put in our heart. But the candle, even if you put it in your heart, it's only as good as it gets lit, which is, of course, brings to mind what a Sangha should be centered on. What should be the central focus of a Sangha? Is it Tattva, Siddhanta? No. Tattva and Siddhanta are absolutely useless, as I'll go on to explain. What about something else I've emphasized in our Sangha? Psychological balance, let's say dealings, interpersonal dealings amongst devotees. Should that be the central focus of the Sangha, of a Sangha? No. If it's not Tattva, Siddhanta, philosophy, it's not the dealings of the devotees that is the main emphasis. What should it be then? And if these things are not valuable unto themselves, how do they become valuable? They become valuable. It's the Siddhanta, the horizontal kind of development I've talked about. The Varnashram sensibilities I've sometimes described essentially as being psychologically balanced. Balance your psychological and physiological nature, so that you got both feet on the ground, right? I've emphasized this, and many of the devotees come from traumatized spiritual and material situations. So I've catered to that, and it has been an emphasis of mine, but which shouldn't be misunderstood. The main focus of the Sangha is psychological balance and interpersonal dealings. Neither is it Tattva or Siddhanta, which also I've given a wealth of. What is it then? It's not Tattva, it's not the balance of Varnashram. What does the Bhagavatam say about the latter? Tyaktva Swadharmam Charanam Bhujam Hareya. Narada is pretty strong about that. And he tells us what the real focus should be. Not tattva, not balance, but sadhana. Sadhana. Deep sadhana. These things are useful, these other two, only as much as they foster deeper conviction in and participation in sadhana, to chant more and more with, as I said here, with a concerted effort. You have to think, and I should be asking you this question, at least at this stage of our Sangha. How many of you have wept uncontrollably, alone, chanting Hare Krishna? How many of you, I can't see you now. You can, and you don't have to raise your hand and get petitioned for that. But this is what it is about. When we go only by sadhana, and can we get the kind of deep bhakti samskars that will change our lives forever, and give us access to a realm where people really and effortlessly get along with one another, without any issues, without any problems, because Krishna is firmly and absolutely in the center of everyone's life. That is the Braj Leela. That's where we want to go. That's the ideal. And therefore, we we have to sit and do our japa and our mantra. Once I was asked by one of my godbrothers, who said, Marsh, how have you become so advanced? Well, of course, that's just his estimation that I'm advanced, but I answered relative to his question. And I, after reflecting for a moment, and I told him, through japa, through my japa. I pay attention to my japa. I chant my japa as if I'm sitting down to go somewhere now. Where the name will take me. What does Bhaktivinoda Thakur say about that? Oh, there's a beautiful prayer of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. At the end, I believe it's at the end of his book, Sharanagati, which is the central focus of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Sharanagati, as it was Pujapat Sridhar Maharaj, whose book Prapanna Jivanamrita, his disciples used to say, this is the only book you need, all about Sharanagati only. His Srinam Mahatmya, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, at the end, Krishna Nam Dhare Kato Bhala. What he says there, Sridhar Maharaj Pujapat Sridhar Maharaj gave a beautiful, spontaneous explanation of the power of Nam to flood my parched heart, the desert of my, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains, parched heart, blazing in the scorching sun of material desire and material existence, and forcibly the name comes and moves my heart, as Bhaktivinoda says, to the tip of my tongue. There it dances. He's talking about really what the name, what is in that sound, those two syllables, Krishna. He says, he begins to speak about sattvika bhavs. My voice falters, my throat chokes up, my body trembles, my tears stream from my eyes, perspiration from the pores of my body. I become stunned with emotion, and a name making a disturbance this way externally makes me, who knows how I might act externally as under this influence. Internally, it showers my heart, he says, with nectar, submerges me in an ocean of prema, prevented me from understanding anything else, made me a madman, stole my heart and wealth. Such Bhaktivinoda goes, I'm kind of paraphrasing, such as the behavior of Namprabhu, of whom I've taken shelter. I can't describe it, he says. However, Krishna's whimsical name becomes pleased, that means my happiness. That's the basis of all my endeavors to serve him. As a bud of a flower of prema, the abode of wondrous rasa manifests such power. Upon blossoming slightly further, the name shows me its personal form and qualities, steals my heart, takes me to Krishna's side. Upon fully blossoming, the name takes me to Braj, shows me his divine pastimes, gives me a form suitable, my eternal form, suitable for serving him, and destroys my material body. It just dissolves my material personality, shows it to be the illusion that it is, the fulfiller of all desires. If I die, Bhaktivinoda says, removing all offenses to the name, I will be happy. I mean, so these types of thoughts expressed here by Bhaktivinoda is so useful to us. It serves to give us a focus. The Sangha must be focused on sadhana. This is the solution to everything. Other things are there, they have their importance, but if they don't foster sadhana, they're useless. They're a waste of time. They get us nowhere. Statement after statement like this in the Bhagavatam. So I'm not here to just pat you on the back. I'm here to tell you you've got some work to do. I've given you the mantras that I've received, and how I've dealt with those mantras, how I've relished them, how I have protected them. Then, upon your request, I've shared them with you. Do you know what that means? When Prabhupada came to Los Angeles and gave the deities there, he was nervous. How can I put the deities in their hands? This is Radha and Krishna. I'm putting in their hands. He was nervous. How will they offend Krishna? And what will Krishna then think of, what will become of me if I've done this? But if I don't give that them Krishna, then what will Krishna think of me? They have some sincerity in their heart. It may be limited. They have some attraction for Krishna. So I take the risk. That's how he looked. I take the risk. He left the deities there. They became the most beautifully worshipped deities in all of ISKCON. That's at one point, Rukmini and Dwarkadeshi used to call them, was the standard of worship. And they had 7 outfits. I knew every outfit by heart. And I guessed which one they would wear that day. And I would meditate on all day long while I was distributing books. He was wearing this sash. She was wearing that sari, these jewels. Eventually, of course, they had a whole wardrobe of beautiful garments and dresses, as did all of the deities of ISKCON. A characteristic of the beautiful ISKCON was its deity worship. There's no standard that compares to it in Gaudiya Sampradaya. There's a different standard in some other Vaidhi-Marg Sampradayas, but that's another thing. So beautiful. But the deity, the mantra, there's no difference between them. So giving them to you, I really beg you to take advantage of them. And this must be the focus, the real center of our Sangha, if it's to be really spiritual and wholesome. And that thought, I mean, just comes to mind as I read this last paragraph. I just thought that I didn't go over this beforehand. I thought I wrote this a while, let me read the preface. But these are the thoughts that come to my mind as I do. Let us hear and light and put the candle in place, and then let's do the work to light it. And when it's lit, there's more work to do. Be sure it doesn't get blown out. Be very, very diligent about that. That is my humble request to all of you. I've gone a little over time. So I'll stop there and leave you with that, and hope to be with you again if Krishna lets me live that long. Till next Sunday. Gaud Bhaktivinoda ki Jai. Gaud Premanande. Hari Hari Bol. Jai Ram. Jai Krishna. Jai Radhe.
Thank you. Okay, sorry, I had to connect with my iPhone because my AirPods are going dead. Okay, so get off this. My iPhone. Okay, so let me make some announcements. Can you hear me? No. Oh yeah, you can. Okay. Who's getting class? Okay, so on the 13th, on Thursday, Shama Sundar is giving class, and then I guess we'll be back here on Sunday.